The Winecoff Hotel fire unfolded in the early morning darkness of December 7, 1946, in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, and it became one of the most consequential urban disasters in American history, not because of the size of the fire alone, but because of what it revealed about the illusion of safety in modern buildings. By the time the fire was extinguished, 119 people were dead, dozens more were injured, and the phrase fireproof building would forever lose its credibility. The tragedy did not occur in a crumbling slum or an industrial warehouse. It occurred in a respected downtown hotel directly across from City Hall, in a building the public had been told was safe by design. The Winecoff Hotel had opened in 1913, during an era when steel frame construction was revolutionizing architecture. At 15 stories tall, it was among the taller buildings in Atlanta at the time and was proudly advertised as modern, sturdy, and fireproof. That claim was technically true under the standards of the day. The steel skeleton of the building would not burn or collapse easily. However, what the public did not understand, and what building codes did not adequately address, was that fire safety is not determined by structure alone, but by interior materials, smoke movement, escape routes, and human response under stress. On the night of the fire, the hotel was nearly full, housing approximately 280 guests. The clientele included traveling salesmen, families, holiday visitors, and most notably, dozens of teenage boys who were members of the Future Farmers of America, attending a statewide convention in Atlanta. Many of these teenagers were housed several floors above ground level, some as high as the 12th through 15th floors. The building had only one interior stairwell, a design that had been legally approved decades earlier but was dangerously inadequate for a high-rise structure filled with sleeping occupants. At approximately 3:15 a.m., when most guests were deeply asleep, a fire ignited on the third floor of the hotel. Although the precise ignition source was never definitively identified, investigators later concluded that the most likely cause was a carelessly discarded cigarette or match. This was not unusual for the era, when smoking indoors was common and ashtrays were often absent or inadequate. The materials that first caught fire, bedding, furniture, or hallway furnishings, were highly combustible, and once ignited, they produced large volumes of thick, toxic smoke almost immediately. What followed was a rapid escalation driven not by flames alone, but by the building's internal design. The Winecoff Hotel contained open vertical shafts in the form of stairwells, elevator shafts, and ventilation passages. As the fire burned on the third floor, hot gases and smoke rose swiftly through these openings, creating a powerful chimney effect. Within minutes, smoke spread upward to the upper floors, long before fire crews arrived and long before many guests even realized there was an emergency. Because there were no smoke detectors, no sprinkler system, and no fire alarm inside individual rooms, there was no coordinated warning. Each guest became aware of the danger at a different moment, often when it was already too late. Many guests awoke coughing, disoriented, and confused, finding smoke seeping under their doors or filling their rooms entirely. Some attempted to open their doors to investigate, only to be met with dense, black smoke that instantly impaired vision and breathing. Others attempted to reach the stairwell, unaware that it had already become a vertical conduit for smoke and heat. Within a short time, the stairwell was completely unusable. Guests who entered it were driven back or overcome almost immediately. In desperation, some guests attempted to use the elevators. At the time, there were no automated safeguards to prevent elevator use during fires. Several elevators malfunctioned or stopped operating as smoke infiltrated their shafts. Some carried passengers directly into smoke-filled corridors, effectively delivering them into lethal conditions. Confusion and panic spread unevenly through the building, with each floor experiencing the disaster differently depending on smoke density and timing. As escape routes vanished, guests began turning to the windows. In room after room, windows were broken to allow fresh air inside. People climbed onto narrow ledges, clung to window frames, or stood on small architectural projections, fighting smoke inhalation while waiting for rescue. Some tied bedsheets together in makeshift ropes, attempting to climb down the building's exterior. Others, overwhelmed by smoke and fear, jumped from upper floors. Many of those jumps were fatal, though firefighters below attempted heroically to catch or cushion falling victims. Atlanta's fire department responded quickly, but they were constrained by the technology of the time. Fire ladders could reach only up to the 8th floor, leaving many guests stranded far above rescue range. Firefighters risked their lives climbing ladders, entering smoke-filled lower floors and guiding survivors down from windows, but the speed and vertical spread of the smoke made large-scale rescue impossible. The fire itself was eventually brought under control, but by then the true devastation had already occurred inside the building. When firefighters finally gained access to upper floors, they encountered scenes of profound tragedy. Many victims were found in their beds, having been overcome by smoke before they ever woke fully. Others were discovered near windows, doors, or hallways, suggesting they had attempted to escape but were blocked by smoke-filled corridors. Autopsies later confirmed that the overwhelming majority of victims died from smoke inhalation, not burns. Carbon monoxide poisoning rendered many unconscious within minutes, depriving them of the ability to flee or even call for help. The loss of life was especially devastating among the Future Farmers of America group. Entire rooms of teenage boys perished together, their escape routes cut off almost immediately. Families traveling together were found together in death. The human toll extended far beyond the immediate victims, sending shockwaves through communities across Georgia and the nation. In the aftermath, public anger and disbelief grew rapidly. How could a fireproof hotel become a death trap? Investigations revealed that while the Winecoff Hotel technically complied with existing building codes, those codes were dangerously outdated. The concept of fire safety had focused almost exclusively on preventing structural collapse, not on smoke behavior, evacuation time, or human survivability. The single stairwell, lack of fire-resistant interior materials, absence of alarms and sprinklers, and unrestricted vertical smoke movement were all legal, but deadly. The term fireproof, investigators concluded, had been grossly misleading. It referred only to the building's frame, not to the lived reality of a fire inside an occupied structure. The disaster made it clear that smoke is often more lethal than flames, and that escape routes must remain viable long enough for occupants to flee. The legacy of the Winecoff Hotel fire proved to be transformative not only for the city of Atlanta, but for fire safety philosophy across the United States and, eventually, much of the modern world. In the months and years following the disaster, investigators, architects, engineers, and lawmakers were forced to confront a reality that could no longer be ignored. Existing building codes were dangerously inadequate for high-occupancy multi-story structures. The tragedy demonstrated with brutal clarity that structural strength alone could not protect lives, and that the greatest threat in fires was not collapse, but smoke, heat, and the rapid loss of escape routes. As a direct result, building regulations were systematically re-evaluated and rewritten to focus on survivability rather than mere compliance. High-rise buildings were no longer permitted to rely on a single stairwell. Codes began to require multiple enclosed, fire-rated stairways, physically separated from one another so that the failure of one escape route would not doom all occupants. Corridors and stair enclosures were redesigned to resist fire and smoke penetration, with fire-resistant doors that could automatically close and contain heat long enough for evacuation. Interior finishes that had once been chosen primarily for aesthetics or cost were now regulated for flame spread and smoke toxicity, reflecting an understanding that furnishings and wall coverings could be as deadly as the fire itself. Automatic sprinkler systems, once viewed as optional or expensive, became central to fire safety strategy. The Winecoff fire showed that early suppression could mean the difference between a localized incident and a building-wide catastrophe. Alarm systems were also fundamentally rethought. Rather than relying on human discovery and word of mouth, buildings were required to incorporate centralized fire alarms capable of alerting all occupants simultaneously, regardless of where the fire originated. Illuminated exit signage and emergency lighting were mandated to ensure visibility in smoke-filled conditions, acknowledging that panic and disorientation are predictable human responses rather than moral failures. Fire departments, too, underwent profound changes. The limitations exposed during the Winecoff disaster spurred investment in taller aerial ladders, improved breathing apparatus, heat-resistant protective gear, and refined interior rescue tactics. Firefighters were trained not only to extinguish flames, but to manage smoke, control ventilation, and prioritize rapid occupant rescue. Over time, these lessons reshaped firefighting doctrine, moving it away from reactive suppression and toward proactive life safety operations. Perhaps most significantly, the Winecoff Hotel fire contributed to the emergence of fire protection engineering as a formal discipline. Engineers began to study fire scientifically, analyzing smoke movement, toxic gas production, evacuation timing, and human behavior under stress. Mathematical models and experimental testing replaced assumptions and tradition. This new field recognized that people do not behave calmly in emergencies, that visibility and airflow determine survival, and that design must anticipate worst-case scenarios rather than ideal conditions. The tragedy helped shift responsibility for safety from individual occupants to the systems built around them. The Winecoff Hotel itself never reopened under its original name, and its identity became inseparable from the disaster. Though the structure was later renovated and repurposed, the memory of the fire permanently marked the site and the collective conscience of the city. Survivors' accounts, photographs of victims at windows, and the stories of entire families lost in minutes became part of Atlanta's historical record, serving as a somber reminder of the cost of complacency. Today, the Winecoff Hotel fire is taught worldwide in courses on fire safety, architecture, emergency management, and public policy. It is referenced alongside other landmark disasters as a foundational case study that illustrates how legal compliance can still produce lethal outcomes, and how progress in safety is often written in human loss. More than a historical event, the fire stands as an enduring warning that safety is not a label, a promise, or a marketing term, but a complex system of design, regulation, technology, and preparedness. When any part of that system fails, or is allowed to remain outdated, ordinary buildings can become deadly environments in a matter of minutes.